today, if you're watching on Thursday, we had a conversation about Penn State. What's going on with the class of 2025? Well, here we are with some good news, Ryan Snyder. Recruiting insider extraordinaire for Blue White Illustrated, the Penn State Nittany Lions class of 2025 has another football player. So who are we talking about today?
Another running back. We'll take it to a whole nother level there. Alvin Henderson. I think a lot of Penn State fans thought, whoa, you're blasting me out there.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Alvin Henderson, running back out of Elba, Alabama, 5'9", 195-ish, right around 200. Interesting recruitment here, man. This is one of those guys that we knew Penn State has been on for a long time. He's publicly spoken about Penn State, but he never was able to visit until, about a week ago. And, it always felt like he's going to stay down south. Auburn's long been considered the favorite. Miami was in there. Florida State, I believe, was as well. But Penn State, from what we understand, was kind of able to talk him out of making a commitment. He was thinking about it on, I believe, April 5th. Comes up and visits then a couple of days later. And it kind of seems to have changed everything. So lots to like here as far as production, as far as all the traits he brings.
Yeah.
3,500 yards rushing last year, 60-some touchdowns. I mean, you want to talk about some crazy
We'll get to
numbers.
his highlights, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It's pretty nutty.
Yeah, 15.7 yards per carry, I believe is what it is. So now he's immediately, I think fans are going to talk Journey Brown here because Journey, I think, had a more crazier statistical year, I guess, but there's similarities as far as, yes, he's playing, I think he's playing 1A. Journey, I think, was maybe he was playing 1A at the time, but I think a lot of fans are going to try and make that comparison. I haven't watched him enough to compare him to Journey, I'll be honest with you, but that's one thing I think that's going to be talked about a good bit on our message boards. But third running back, Tyke Hayes, of course, Keandre Barker, both committed. I do not really see a situation where they take Alvin and somebody else is going to get pushed to the side. Like, they love Barker. Barker didn't play last year, but I've had multiple people remind me about what they saw from him as a sophomore. And then Tyke Hayes, of course, has had an excellent season. He's from Aliquippa. He's from PA, and he isn't going anywhere. So I do think they're going to sign 3 running backs in this class. And the main thing I would say is, with Henderson, it would be, is his recruitment completely finished? Because he has talked about taking official visits elsewhere. I know Auburn, Miami, like the schools I mentioned, they're going to keep working to get him on campus. And he has admitted he will take those official visits. Now, of course, Penn State's going to do everything they can to not. So let's see where things go over this 6 weeks. But good commitment. Penn State needs more 4-stars in their class, right? And he's a 4-star all the way through. Number 203 at On3, and then you look at the On3 industry rankings, which of course put together Rivals and ESPN and 24/7. He's up to number 110 nationally. Yeah. So go ahead, T. Frank, take it.
No, I'm interested in where your information, your understanding about these out-of-region prospects is, as far as, you laid out Penn State was able to get him up on campus and give him something to think about. And here, clearly, he thought a lot about it. So how do you go about understanding these long-distance relationships, and how have you tracked this particular recruitment from a state where Penn State does get some guys, Trey Wallace from Alabama, a couple other players they've had over the years from Alabama, but not a whole lot. How do you view these things, and is there any interesting nuggets that you've found during this particular taking on this player?
Give Seider a lot of credit, just consistency. I think when you're unable to get a guy on campus for over a year, but you're chipping away at that relationship. I think it does really speak to how much they like him. I think Penn State going down there multiple times played an impact as well. I believe James went to his school, or I know Seider's been down there, but. Actually, may not have been Seider too, because I think Seider actually just had his surgery. But talking about in January, I think James went down there, and maybe it was Charles Walker after that. But just consistency, man, and that's what Penn State has always done well. I mean, there's so many recruits out there that will tell you Penn State is recruiting them as hard as anyone else, and that is oftentimes true, even for their Plan B, Plan C kind of guys. And that's not Alvin Henderson. He's always been a top target for them. But I think that consistency played a major role. Again, what I will come back to though is, is if he takes those official visits, like how finished is this recruitment? And that's something that we don't often see with Penn State. I mean, that's something that Penn State really tries to stay away from. But at the same time, this is one of those situations, and we talked about this on the pod today, where like you can't, if he wants to commit to you, you absolutely have to take him now, because if for any reason they were to say, okay, hey, we really like you, but like, let's talk about this for another couple of days, like
Yeah.
I think you immediately kind of shoot yourself in the foot there. So you take his commitment. Obviously, a player they've always really liked. So there's no real reason not to. I'm just very curious on the whole balance of him visiting elsewhere, and Penn State always tries to stay away from that. How's that going to play out here?
It's interesting when you look at the composite. You mentioned 3 running backs in this class, and Keandre Barker, I'd say athletic, very athletic. We have no idea where he is as a football player. Tyke Hayes, excellent at the position. And then there's so many different aspects of this highlight film. And again, just looking at the highlight film, not going into any of the full game setups, but this particular offense seems to run a lot out of the quarterback position, and he's got highways to run down. So, this is a trust Ja'Juan Seider recruitment because, there's some good things you can see here. Good change of direction, good vision, but it's single A. How much of this stuff translates to the next level? Just from an offensive perspective, he's getting a lot given to him by his blocking. He takes full advantage of it. So you don't want to take any of that away from him. But there's just 5'9", and what else does he bring, athletically to the table? I'm just curious to learn more about Alvin Henderson. But on the surface, 4-star running back, Ja'Juan Seider has been actively after this guy. You got to assume that he's got some skills that Penn State wants, even if you don't see everything you want to see on film. You talked to Charles Power about this, and that article, again, bluewhiteillustrated.com, he's seen more than I have. What were his thoughts on Alvin Henderson and his translatable skills to the next level?
Just, I think maybe it's consistency over the last couple of years. Good vision, follows his blockers well. All those kind of little things that you want to see. The biggest knock, and I don't even really want to call it too much of a knock, it's just like, what is his overall speed? Because he's ran a couple 4.7s at different camps, which isn't bad. I think we often talk about like 4.5 has to be this number. Like that's the number that gets people excited, right? 4.5 and downward 4.3, 4.4, all that kind of stuff. 4.7 is not bad at all. I mean, and he can still improve on that and get it down to 4.6, 4.5 range. I just think like that's when you're looking at these highlights, he's run away from a lot of guys, but like that's not going to be the case when he gets to the Big Ten. So just see how he progresses there. But I mean, there's no like he is incredibly productive and has done this consistently for multiple. I mean, he's going to have 10,000 yards rushing or more, by the time he finishes. I apologize. I don't have his freshman and sophomore stats in front of me, but I know he had great stats those years too. Mm-hmm. So just consistency with all those kind of things and good vision, all that kind of stuff.
So now that we're kind of getting to the end of this particular conversation about Alvin Henderson, I always want to make sure that's the focus of the video, but the class at large, blue-white weekend coming up as well. What is on your radar for Penn State football recruiting and some of the different things that make up this class? Because a third running back, we talked about this on the podcast today and on the show, is rare to have a third running back in the class. So how does this change the makeup or the personality of the class of 2025 to you?
Yeah, it's only the second time we've seen it since 2014. And all 3 of those guys, Mark Allen, Jonathan Thomas, Nick Scott, of course, Nick Scott ended up at safety. They all committed under Bill O'Brien. Franklin wasn't going to push him away right when he gets in the door. I mean, Franklin got hired. He had like 3 weeks till signing day. So technically, I mean, I wouldn't say Franklin has ever had a 3 running back class until now, but technically that was, under his, leadership then. But moving forward, there's a lot. I mean, wide receiver is going to be incredibly interesting. The thing I would say is just Penn State just needs to get to June at this point. They are in the mix with a lot of guys, a lot of high quality guys. And I think if they can pluck a couple of these players that we're not talking about as much as maybe we should be, like there's some really good wide receivers like Samari Reed down in Florida, a couple guys like Kelshawn Johnson. I mean, I haven't really talked about him at all. Really good receiver out of Houston. Andrew Marsh is another one that like there are some really high, they're shooting really high for some of these guys. If they can pluck a couple of those, it really kind of changes, I think, a lot about how fans look at this class because of how important that position is. But, just when I look at the numbers, 12 should be right around a 25-person class. There's certainly work to be done at wide receiver. They would like to add at least one more tight end because I do believe Brady O'Hare is going to end up as an offensive tackle and, and how that impacts offensive line recruiting, time will tell, although certainly guys like Michael Carroll and Malachi Goodman and others are going to be coveted. And then when you look at defense, man, getting some defensive linemen on board, linebackers should be fine. I'm not worried about defensive back. I think they're in position with enough quality guys that they'll be just fine there. So to me, get wide receiver figured out. You got to get Olish or one of those top tight ends committed. If you can get a Carroll or a Goodman on the O-line, that really helps. And maybe they circle back with another quarterback. I think it's unlikely at this point. I think that they just stick with Kritza. But that's another wild card. We'll see with time.
They have now 7 running backs in the last 3 cycles. So they've stocked up.
It's the transfer portal era. Yeah, but it's the transfer portal era. And the cream's going to rise to the top, and we'll see where things go. But I think that has a big part of it. They expect some of these guys to rise up. They expect Quinton Martin and Corey Smith. And, we'll see with Cam Wallace and London Montgomery. Those guys have the experience and the edge from those perspectives. So we'll see. But I think they fully expect Nick and Katron to go pro. And then, these 7 kind of get things sorted out and go from there.
And we'll be tracking that the entire time. And, of course, the class of 2026, there's a running back committed there as well. So Ja'Juan Seider, yes. He is just stacking them up one after another in the class of 2025, 2026. Ryan Snyder, thank you so much for your insight into this particular recruitment of Alvin Henderson. Again, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss any breaking content, any breaking news, or, of course, any interviews, features, live shows, all kinds of stuff coming up. Because even after Blue White Weekend, there's all kinds of things happening. The transfer portal is open, so you've got
the transfer portal's back.
You've got plenty of things to listen to and learn about from Blue White Illustrated. We'll be back with the next one.